Hello folks, and welcome to another video. In today's video we are going to be talking about fatwood, what it is, where to find it and how to use it. If you've never heard of fatwood before, it might be a little bit confusing as to what it actually is. It has a bit of an unusual name, but essentially it is a wood from a pine tree that has died and the tree has filled it with resin, and that resin is highly flammable. It has a bunch of other uses as well, but for us in the bushcraft sphere, its primary and most attractive use is in the use of firelighting, particularly in wet weather firelighting. It's an incredibly valuable resource and it is very, very easy to find. But online, there's a lot of myths and a lot of stories about how difficult it is to find and you've got to dig it out of bogs and stuff, and that couldn't be further from the truth. It's actually really quite simple to find. The first thing we've got to do is find a bunch of pine trees, just like these ones around me. I've got some spruces behind me here. They won't contain fatwood, but in amongst these spruces we do have some pine trees, so it is important to get your tree identification down before you can do this. But once you've identified the trees, it's pretty easy to get your hands on some of this lovely fatwood. There's one just over here we're going to look at. This tree right here is a primary candidate. This is a very dead Scots pine tree, and what I'm looking for is these dead branches that are lower down. There will be fatwood in the base of this tree, but I don't have an axe today, so I'm not going to be felling this, and it's actually a lot easier to take it from these branches. You can do this from live trees, but some of the bigger live trees tend not to have these small branches low down. But if you're in an area that has lots of young pine trees, down at the bottom they will have these dead branches and they will contain the fatwood that we are looking for. But for me, I tried to find a nice dead tree so that I can absolutely guarantee I'm not going to do any damage to it. It's already dead. So what I'm going to do is I have to come to these dead branches here. I'm going to take my saw and I'm going to saw them off as close to the trunk of the tree as I possibly can. And straight away, as soon as I started sawing that, I could see that nice rich orangey colour coming out of the sawdust that I was using. And this is what we are looking for, that rich kind of caramel goldeny colour. Generally, when you're cutting this, you will smell it long before you see it, and that is a dead giveaway. And this is the stuff that we're after. So how to use this is also pretty simple. So I've got all my fatwood pieces ready to go, and I've also collected myself a sheet of birch bark. This is just going to be a platform. You'll see what that's for in a little minute. So this is the fatwood that we're looking for. I've kept my stick quite long for the time being, but just to show you the difference. So if we look here, this one's got that deep caramel colour, and then this one is nice and pale. This one has very little to no resin in it, so it's no use to us, but not to worry because that stick is still good for making little feathers and for getting our fire going later on. But this is the stuff that we are after. So we need to begin preparing this. To prepare it, I'm going to take my knife and I am just going to take off the outer bits of the wood so I can see where that fatwood begins. Spend a bit of time doing this. Once I clear it up, you can really see the kind of saturation of that resin within the wood. Now the majority of it tends to be on what would have been the underside of the branch, because that's where it likes to fall because of gravity. The tree isn't pumping it around anymore at this point because the branch will have died. And all these little shavings that are coming off, we can keep those as well. So I'm going to take this off all the way around so we can see one side here is pretty pale, but this side here is quite dark, and that is the stuff that we are after. So the next thing that I want to do here is I'm going to take the back of my knife, I'm going to find the section of the wood that has the most amount of resin in it, and I'm going to begin scraping it with my knife to just get some of that material off. I can be quite rough with it, but I want to try and catch as much as I can on that platform just down there. And spend a bit of time doing this. You want a reasonable amount of it. Try not to let it spread, and if it's windy, try and do this with a bit of a wind block because that stuff will blow away. So I'm going to work away at this until I've got a reasonable amount, and then we're going to move on to our next step. Now, as I've collected a small amount of the dust there, what I want to do now is begin making myself some nice fine curls of this fatwood. Almost like feather sticks. Don't have to be too precious with these. I'm going to try and keep these together if I can. So once I've done a few, I'm just going to snip them off with a knife as best as I can. I don't want to release. There we go. I'll pop them off to one side. Now, when you're working with this, be aware that your hands will start to get sticky quite quickly. So stuff will begin sort of sticking to them. Okay, that should be enough curls for today. Now on to lighting it. So to begin the process of lighting this, I'm going to make sure I've got everything ready. So I've got my ferro rod and my knife to strike it on, and I'm going to get all these powdery bits, and I'm just going to place them together. I'm going to position myself with my back to the wind so that it doesn't take those little curls away, and I'm going to gather some of these spread out ones just into the middle. I want this quite bunched up if I can get it. So in a real situation, if I was actually making a proper fire, I would be getting more of this, and I will be getting more of these curls as well. So this is ready to go. So I'm going to take my ferro rod and I'm just going to throw sparks directly into it. Of course, you could use a lighter or matches for this as well, but always good practice to use your ferro rod. I'm going to get a couple of those shavings in there. I'm of course going to miss with all of my sparks. And there she goes. I'm going to give it a second to get going, and then I'm going to begin adding some of these little curls just to the edge, and they will take, you can really smell it, that resin. And of course, because I've used birch bark, that's going to ignite as well, and I now have the beginnings of a very hot fire. And the great thing about this fatwood is that it will burn quite hot for quite a long time. So we can just keep that going now, and then I could begin adding my next lot of firewood if I had to or needed to. But you can see it really burns because there's wood in there as well as the resin. Oh, the birch bark's gone as well now. That's fine, that'll take. We have ourselves a nice sustaining fire that's doing its own thing there. So folks, there you go, a nice, quick, simple and easy way to find, identify, collect and use your fatwood. This is a really excellent method for lighting fires in wet or damp conditions. Obviously, I'm not in those conditions today, but it really does work. And don't forget, if you're using the pine tree to gather your firelight and resources, the small branches of pine trees, especially the ones that are still attached to the tree, are usually pretty dry. They've got a small amount of that resin in, and they can be used to build that fire up into something a bit more sustainable and usable for a wet night out in the woods. So yeah, as always, I hope you got something from this video. Please do leave me a comment, leave me a like, make sure you subscribe and follow all of that good stuff. And until next time, enjoy the outdoors, take care of yourselves, and bye for now.